Welcome to Aid Movies. Hope you're all having a swell day. It has been a while, but I'm back ready to deliver more videos to all you 4 or 5 people who are watching this and maybe more in the future. Uh, this year I've started a New Year's resolution to make 100 videos this year. That's approximately 2 videos every week. This is the first of that 100, so be prepared for much more regular content on my channel coming soon. However, without further ado, let's get to the subject of the video, which is all 23 Pixar Animation Studios movies ranked in from Toy Story to Soul. So, of course, know that this list is completely subjective. It's my opinion, and you probably don't share all the same opinions. So, you can share yours in the comments below, and don't ruin me for my opinion. Coming in 23rd place is Cars 2. Now, this wasn't a good movie. I'm sorry to say it, but Pixar could have chosen to make a sequel on many of their other movies before this, and they chose to make a sequel on Cars, which we didn't really need. The cars act more like humans than like cars in this one. The two plots didn't fit well with each other. Overall, it just didn't feel like a good Pixar movie or even a good Cars movie when you shove the side character into the front of the film, which is now becoming more common in these modern films, unfortunately. In 22nd place was The Good Dinosaur. I have more positives to say about this film. The animation was gorgeous. Everything looked so lifelike and realistic, save the main characters who are obviously made to look like animated characters. However, the story was bland. It felt lacking, and it wasn't captivating. Normally, when you get a Pixar movie, there's always that captivating spark that makes you see things a little bit differently. This just felt like another dinosaur movie. In 21st place is A Bug's Life. Now, this was one of the first movies that Pixar made. So the animation was pretty lacking. The story didn't feel like it was really going anywhere. You have bugs who are making a deal with this gangster guy. I guess he's sort of part of a mob, and he expects payment from them, so they try to defend themselves, and it's a story of this small character with GIF, unlikely hero, and he eventually defeats the big mob bug. So that's that. In 20th place is Toy Story 2. Now, I know that there are so many Pixar lovers, and among them, the Toy Story films in general have their own basically following where you can't say anything bad about any Toy Story movie to them. However, this one just it doesn't feel as Toy Story, if that makes any sense, as the other three films. It didn't leave much lasting impact. Of course, it's good to see the characters again, but the Buzz storyline with Zurg, I wasn't the biggest fan of that, and it's good to see Woody grow and improve upon himself, and it gave a lot of new things to the Toy Story uh, rules that we didn't get in the first movie, but all in all, it was the weakest addition to the Toy Story movies. In 19th place is Finding Dory. Now, this is a movie I enjoyed. It's 19th place, sure, but that's because it's Pixar and they have really, really good record when it comes to movies in general. So, Finding Dory, really good movie. I enjoyed it. There were, of course, flaws. The fundamentals, once again, they took the side character from the first story and they brought them as lead from the second story, and Dory's parents, that storyline, the way they took it was good, but it felt like something that we didn't really need. In 18th place was Cars 3. Now, I was very skeptical when coming into this, watching this movie. It didn't interest me. I had seen Cars 1, I had seen Cars 2 and how that went. Cars 3 didn't look any interesting, and then it introduced so many new things, and this, I could say, was at least a satisfying ending to the Cars storyline. It doesn't really resolve all of our questions about the fundamentals of these cars from the first two films brought up, but it was still a good classic ending to this story. When I say classic, it's not really classic, but it wraps it up well. In 17th place is Monsters University, taking the monsters we know from Monsters Inc. and giving them a prequel story with questioned canon abilities because of that one line from Mike in the original movie. But all in all, it's a good college film, good monsters film, and it gives you everything that you could want or want in a sequel, prequel like this. In 16th place was Brave. Now, I know quite a bit of people who are not a fan of this movie and who say it's one of the worst of the Pixar movies. I'm not one of these people. I didn't I didn't hear much about Brave before it came out, and so I wasn't led the wrong way by any of their misleading trailer. So I enjoyed this film for what it is. I experienced it as that, and sure, it may not have felt like the most Pixar of movies, but it was a good movie and a good storyline, general premise, nevertheless. Now we're at 15 movies left, and basically anything up from here I really enjoyed. It was a movie that I would rewatch again and again. This is like true Pixar in my mind. So in fifth place is Coco. It had a brilliant animation style. It was just fascinating and lighting up everywhere. You had an interesting protagonist, an interesting concept. You had a good story idea, which is basically the same as concept, but they carried it well. For a film about music, not my preferred style of film, but they took a genre of music. Is it genre really? Well, the music that they took is not really my style, but they let me see that it was good. This is, yeah. Also, the very sad ending. Very nice. Very nicely done, Pixar. In 14th place is Incredibles 2. Was it as good as The Incredibles? Of course not. Can't live up to that. But it was still very good nonetheless. Honestly, I think this villain could rival Syndrome. Not as good, obviously, but still has the same charm as Syndrome. The animation was just as good as the first one this time around. The way they took the side character, sort of, and brought Elastigirl to the lead, or Mrs. Incredible, I didn't mind that as much in this movie. It still felt very much like a shared story, like it did in the original Incredibles. Of course, I'm a sucker for superhero movies, and so when you bring that to style of animation, it's something that I really enjoy. In 13th place is Ratatouille. Need to speed things up. Great movie. Let me see in the perspective of a flawed but protagonist that you can see through the eyes of them. It just sort of hooked me in with this idea revolving around the love of food, which many can share, almost everybody basically, and all the characters were intriguing. It felt nice. The setting was great, of course, Paris and all that. The antagonist or villain, they were honestly one of my favorite Pixar villains, and so overall, just a really good film. In 12th place is Monsters Incorporated. Many have this higher on my list. I wish I could have it higher, but of course, I see all the other Pixar movies higher than it, and I realize why it's still in 12th place. This probably has one of the smartest and most clever concepts of any of the Pixar movies. The way the monsters collect screams and they use those for energy and eventually realize laughter is coming to a point where it's becoming more important. Of course, this movie is also important because it's a key piece of the infamous Pixar theory. That's important. Gets big bravo points for that. Sully and Mike, great main characters, great villain, great emotional resonance. Yep. In 11th place is Toy Story. Not the best animation for a Pixar movie. Of course, that's because it was the first one made. Sid and Andy look both sort of disturbing, I should say. But what it lacks in animation, it definitely makes up for it in emotional resonance and story. You have these toys that are coming to life when the kids aren't around, which plays on the heart of every kid who plays with toys. And these are characters Buzz, Lightyear, Woody, all of which who you remember. They're very memorable protagonists, and they have just this fun adventure that you're hooked on for the whole movie. Bringing us into the top 10 is Cars. Now, part of this, of course, is definitely some nostalgia playing in, making me rank Cars higher, but every time I rewatch it, it's just a nice story. Whenever I see it, I don't pause to think, "Oh wait, how are these cars alive? How are they doing all these things?" I just can enjoy it for the story it's trying to tell, and that is, if that's the story of making lots of money, well, it's also the story of this rookie hotshot car who gets humbled and gets put in his place and is able to see the world from a bigger picture and start giving to the people, or in this case, cars around him. So for that, it's a good movie. You can argue with me this, but this one was a good movie. In ninth place for me is Soul, the newest Pixar movie to come out. About, of course, this will contain spoilers for Soul. This jazz musician, Joe, sort of a jazz teacher, that right after he gets the shot of his lifetime, he dies before he is able to experience it, and then he needs to get back into his body to relive his life, and it plays out multiple uh, hijinks ensue with him and another soul 22 who discover the meaning of life, or spark. And there's Jerry and Terry, who, wow, Terry was a great antagonist. You, of course, a villain, but you can relate. Like, they're just, Terry's just trying to do his job. Just let him do that. And so you can't fault the antagonist. Protagonist, maybe not the best protagonist, but the, of course, duo that Pixar bring in with Joe and 22. It's great. It very emotional. It's a good movie to watch when it came out right around Christmas time, because it's not a Christmas movie, but it has that same emotional feely style movie. In eighth place is Toy Story 4, the last of the Toy Story films that, well, Toy Story 3 wrapped up the Andy's part of the story. This one sort of wrapped up Woody's part of the story. Definitely felt necessary. Of course, it had so much emotion. The animation is incredible. It came a long way from the first Toy Story to this one. Such great emotional value, a great story. Of course, like, there's some points at the ending and Buzz's inner conscience voice that talks to himself that aren't the best plot points, that are holding it back, but everything else about it was just incredible. Forky's a good character as well. In seventh place is my favorite of the Toy Story films, Toy Story 3. Great cast, all of them are present and doing stuff. None of it feels overhyped. You have probably the best Toy Story villain in Lotso. You explore more of the different toys and some of their jaded, what's the word for it? Points of view. That's the best I can offer at this time. And you, of course, get to see all these, like, once again, hijinks ensue with this massive prison break inside of a child's daycare. And the ending was incredible, and you can't top that. Well, you could, but it'd be really difficult. In sixth place is Wally, a touching story about two robots who find love, and also there's fat humans who want to save themselves from robots. So, what this movie did that was incredible is, for the first 10, 20, about 20 minutes, there was no sound. I mean, no, not no sound. There was no lines. Wally didn't say anything. Nothing happened. How do I rephrase this? They managed to capture a 10 to 20 minute story at the start with absolutely no speaking lines, just expressions and animation, and that is incredible in that regard. In fifth place is Inside Out, the story about emotions that was emotional, and the main character, Joy, sort of not the most. She's meant to be all joyful things, which sounds amazing, but at some point she just sort of becomes obsessed with it, and she needs the other emotions to balance her. You get to see all of this inner workings in the head that's all interesting. The pacing of the story, the whole idea of the story, everything feels incredibly creative and earned up until the very emotional end, and the animation is really good too. In fourth place is The Incredibles, the classic animated superhero movie about this family that's sort of like the Fantastic Four, but in a way better because they're the Incredibles, and you sort of can't match that. This one definitely also has a lot of nostalgia looped into it, but the heroes are great. The family dynamic is great. The pacing works. The villain is incredible. And Syndrome, of course. And uh, yeah, it just has lots of action. The animation actually works really well for being one of the earlier Pixar movies. So all in all, just a really good movie. In top three, third place, that is Finding Nemo. Speaking of one of the first Pixar movies that has really good animation, this has a great duo with Marlin and Dory. Of course, he has Nemo with being captured and all of that. And when I was a child as in shorter and more naive than I am now, that I thought the story was about Nemo. Now I realize the story is primarily about Marlin and realizing he is being overprotective and he needs to step back to let his son enjoy life, and he overcomes his grief by going on this adventure to through the ocean to save him. Dory has a great part of this as well. She uh, rounds out that cast with all of these people. Now we're down to the remaining two films in Pixar that are left. You know which two films I'm talking about if you've been listening. If you reached this far in the video, please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what your ranking is or how you would see things differently. Please be respectful. Uh, Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. But without further ado, let's go to the top two. In second place is Up. First 10 minutes of the movie, incredible performance. Probably the best 10 minutes Pixar has made with all that story. The rest is still an incredible journey with Carl Fredricksen and all of the rest of the characters. Charles Muntz, his childhood hero, maintained a very well villain. The pacing was incredible. There's so much emotion wrapped in this one of this old man who people didn't really see him as he saw the rest of the world, and he sort of had to learn to let go, and that is heartwarming and good message. But in our number one place is Onward. This movie was incredible. The animation was great. The cast of all the characters was great. The quest, the timing, it worked. I didn't really have any problems with this. This was probably the most relatable movie to me in my current state. Maybe it won't be in the future, but it was super relatable when I watched it. Still is. Still my favorite after 6 or 7 months. I don't know how long it's been with this virus, but that was my favorite of the Pixar movies. So, yep, that's all I have to say. You can go now. Shoo shoo. I shouldn't say shoo. That's offensive. You guys are great for sticking around.